Okay. Seems Seribot has not joined today, which is worrying, but we'll see. Timer on. Guess we'll see. Okay. That's Abalonia. This is sprints. So, today. Yesterday, at the end of the stream, we started to wire up the ability to create a sprint in the task component. Again, this is not called tasks in the long term. We're just got to figure out a better name or where it fits. So we create a sprint endpoint. Still not sure that's not sprints, but we'll figure that out as we go. And last night I spent the time, I wired up the create sprint. I got the handler, I got the validator, I got all this wired up so you can do the validation. The way the validator works is it gets put in the pipeline. So when it calls this, when it invokes this command, right, when it invokes a create sprint command, it will invoke the validator on the command and validate before it even gets into the actual handler. So that's the way that works. So the pattern I have is I create a validator. It's a partial class of this create sprint, and it's just a validator. So you have the command, the handler, and the validator all here. And then we just create the sprint. And that looks like tasks, DBO, tables, sprints. That. So we can create a sprint. Morning, Deflux. How's it going? You up all night working? I just can't sleep. Got this thing. Ah. Well, good to have you at the beginning. Hope you're well today. I rely heavily on alarms each and every day. So, yeah. So, right now, I need to deal with the integration event side of this. Actually, we could probably remove this record because this record will never have the integration event published for it. So we need to deal with the update handler side of this. So private repository is sprint, yeah. Private update sprint handler subject equals null. Yeah, you can go ahead and stub them up for me. Thank you. I like it didn't create the subject. New. Oh, that's not the act. It's in the arrange. So let's go and sketch out some of this. So the part we're working on now is the part to get the sprint from this component over here. Again, naming competition, if anyone can think of what this name actually looks like as a component. Tasks and sprints live in this component. The closest thing I can think about is execution, but that just seems like a horrible name. So, because again, ticketing, planning, and stuff, and I'm not calling it work because it sounds offensive. And then we do subject handle, new update sprint, where that would be tenant identifier. That would be identifier. That would be name. That would be start date time. That would be end date time. That would be source user identifier. Yeah, that works. So none of this exists yet, so we're good. Sprint is created, so we want to do repository dot received dot add async arg dot is a sprint, and that sprint had sprint identifier equals identifier. We're talking about a sprint. There's no point naming it something else. Yeah, that works. And s.tenant ID equals it's okay, Tails. You're good. Tenant ID. So when we create the data, we'll be asking for the actual IDs. Read only in tenant ID. Yeah, yeah. They don't matter. Private read only created by user ID equals 40,040. That's an int as well. And s dot name equals sprint name equals name. Same reason as before. S dot start date time equals start date time. And s dot end date time. Actually, those need look. We'll update tasks. Did I make them date time offsets? Did I deal with the dates before task date added? No, I just sent it a date time, and then in the view. So that's a date time offset. That's a date time offset. That's a date time offset. And then when I get the date, I get the date time of the date time offset. Okay, that's fine. So I do want to carry that forward. Date time offset. Date time offset. Um, so when I'm passing dates around the system, I want everything UTC. When it was done doesn't really matter. Or which time zone it was done in doesn't really matter. So all the dates get passed around as UTC. So when I'm passing this in here, basically when the client displays it, it's going to show the time it was done. It's going to store the time as a date time in SQL Server. But this allows me to make sure that I'm always passing through the actual date time offsets, right? So no, the older ones won't do it, but the newer ones as well. So new tasks will show that. So yeah, it'll go with a +0. It'll indicate that it is time in UTC. So with the offsets that way, this works. So I have an extension method that I just added yesterday. just to make sure. I looked at how to do this, and it seems this is this might be just it can't compile. So we want to do that, and we also want to verify the sender. So we need a sender in here. Private I sender equals null. The reason I like using n substitute is I don't actually have to set these up as mocks or whatever. I don't have to wrap their interfaces or anything else. I can actually just refer to them as the actual things. It's just how I create them, like the substitute here. That's the difference. So that's why I've really taken to using n substitute, because it just makes the code that little bit cleaner. You're not looking for these massive, these like nested interfaces everywhere. New date time. That's probably why. Yeah, because it couldn't infer from the left-hand side. So that's fine. That's fine. So in here we want to do sender received dot send arg acquire tenant, tenant identifier, and similar acquire user. Yep, that's what we want to verify. So now I just need to make sure this builds and then runs. So we go to the domain. The domain contains our entities. We're not doing view just yet. We're just doing, because we're storing the data, so we need the update side of it, which is the actual core entity. This is a sprint. This is going to contain, I kind of cheated and created the script for this already. Scripts, view 015, sprints.sql. As always, any questions, thoughts, opinions, always welcome. There's our view. Seems really formatted, but anyway. Okay. So I think we have a view-based class. I think tasks inherits from view-based class. Yeah, view-based long. Sprints aren't gonna, we're not gonna go through 4 billion sprints, so I'm not gonna worry about anything but the default. Yeah, that looks about right, doesn't it? That looks like a sprint. Date time. Yeah, date time. Last updated is nullable. Updated is nullable. Created by, yep. Oh, good. Oh, they're not necessary because they're in the base class. Okay. They added a last updated there. Okay. So ID is wrapped. Identifier is in there. Yeah. Okay. So now blah, 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 blah. Private read-only string name equals name. So the only thing we need now is to create the actual thing. You know, if you're not pulling in dependencies and stuff, it's okay to kind of put them in here, but I'm just not messing around with it. Global using That's fine as well. Keep the test file so you get to the test quicker. Global usings are very useful for that. Okay, so let's go and create our thing. Doo-be-doo-doo. So in our application, we have integration. This is what we're dealing with right now. We're concerning integration. Two aspects to this is the integration and acquiring. Adrian Learns, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome in. How's it going? Thank you. How was the stream? Hi, Juice. How you doing? Wrestling with database today. How you doing? Doing good. Doing good. Just really just kind of getting underway for the day. Building some unit tests around adding sprints into my system. So the app won't run right this second, so I can't really demonstrate it. But basically what I'm building is a large application for project management and planning. So it's distributed, it uses Kafka, it uses all sorts of different technologies, lots of different databases, lots of different tools. But ultimately, my long-term goal for the project is I want to build an application that helps me plan the way I think planning should be done. Helps people ask the right questions at the right time and gets to the requirements sooner. So yeah, I probably need to record a video at this point, considering it could be down for long periods of time. But ultimately, so we might be able to run the application enough to show read-only view. You're going to start. These might start and the app will show. As long as I don't try and change anything, that should be good. How's the database stuff coming along? Did you get the file imported? Sounds like a lot of records you were trying to import, right? So so this is Liquid Sky. It's my little code name for this project. Basically, it's if you've used Jira or any tools like that, it's basically the same concepts. Figure out the import in the end. Apparently, you can only import 500 at a time. Ugh, that's rough. When you're using tools like Jira, my problem is that the work that you are planning to do and the work that you're doing often, get muddled up together. The planning is not dealt with as an independent component. The stories live in the backlog. There's all sorts of stuff there making noise. Then you go into the whole agile slash Scrum side of things. It's like, well, you can't write technical stories, or people misinterpret those rules around that. So you end up with stories that are business focused, but then are open to interpretation by the developers when it comes to the software side. So what I'm building is a tool where the product team doesn't have the concept of sprints. The product team just has the concept of a planning backlog, right? So they have a review date. These review dates are automatic. They're required. A planning item must have a review date, and it kind of pulls it into focus. So if they are planning stuff and they're saying, oh, I need to worry about this in 6 months, they can move it 6 months out, and later on it will come back into their view. So work they should be focused on currently. Ideally, nothing should be past due, right? But work they should be working on right now to plan. They should be preparing this stuff, specifying, okay, here's our sprint. And then they put their requirements in. The requirements are the way they think about them. It's their expectations of what this software should do, not the technical aspects of this. Because one requirement can yield many actual actions from the developers and can be broken down even further. But why make the product team worry about that? That's a development concern, not a product concern. So we have the ability to add tasks. So tasks are closer to what Jira's stories are now. You can add a task, and each one of these can have one or many tasks, or zero or many, actually. It could just be a requirement that's specified and has no actual technical implementation. When you click the button, and then the idea is the developers would add the tasks to work on this. And right now we have in the task board, these are all the tasks that are built there, and that's the actual requirement or the product, the planning item it comes from. And then when you bring up the actual details of the task, you see why you're doing this task, like what's it actually linked to. And that's just a link directly back to the requirement that drove it. UI is very rough. It's just because I need something. You can also mark a task as, the status of a task. And right now, what we're doing is we're building the idea of sprints into the system, so we can actually generate sprints. The long-term goal of the application is very much about alerting and notifications and making more things visible, so that if some work is assigned to you, you know it's assigned to you. If some work is pending, we can know it's pending. We don't have to be asking people. We can see where work actually lies, and be more clear about what's going on. Yeah, so that's Project Liquid Sky. So what I'm working on today is actually tackling the ability to get those sprints back into the UI. The system is very separated. So when I make an action here, it goes and performs the action in its own component, which publishes a Kafka integration event, and then other systems can consume that. Right now, the changes components pick out things and calculate differences and enrich them and decide if people need to be notified about things. And yeah, there's a whole back end piece. And then the view is a GraphQL database. So there's a SQL database here with GraphQL sat in front of it. And yeah, there's a whole GraphQL API. And then everything's wrapped behind an API gateway. So the client, which is in Angular, keeps on working. But yeah, the purpose of the streaming this is to share the journey, share the challenges, share the pains, and I'm always open to questions, thoughts, or opinions on what I'm doing, because I'm just here to learn like the rest of us. So let's create the update handler for the sprint. Update sprint. We're going to need a command. Yeah, that's about right. Well, kind of. So that's a GUID tenant identifier. That's a GUID. Nope, that doesn't look right. Date time offset. Start date time offset, end date time. Did I do? Oh, pass them is up. Did I make them? Foundation messaging events. Yes, I made everything date time offset. Okay. We need to go back here. Make them. So update sprint. I command. Don't think that needs a result yet. That's a GUID Created by user identifier. So I'm using Mediator as my tool here, a library. Not to be confused with Mediator R, which is another library for Mediator. So I command handle, I sender, I repository, sprint repository. I know I'm going to need it. I'm not messing around. Yeah, that's correct. There we go. Command is never instantiated. That's fine. Now I can go over here and that'll include, we can pass in sender repository. This should build. Tenant identifier. Name. What am I missing? Oh, last updated. They added last updated. So that's actually that, and this is a create, so that's null. Yeah. So your unit tests do tell a little story of how to use the system as well. So it's important that I'm expecting to create something here. I'm not expecting to update it. Therefore, I shouldn't be passing in last updated. Even though it would get ignored, I don't want to risk it, assuming that behavior is there. So, yeah, date added. We don't need that. Okay, so we should be able to run the test. It should fail because it should throw a not implemented exception. There you go. That's not the right error. So where are you breaking? UTC offset the local date type parameter does not match the offset argument. When you do a command and state changes somewhere, how do you track the state change? When you do a command. Morning, daughter, by the way. It's in the event. So the way this is working, let's say I do the create sprint, right? So the create sprint is done. The idea being there that it's going to save to the database. There's no actual extra pieces. What happens is when this saves to the database, and once this is committed to the database and it knows it's got it, it publishes a domain event to say this sprint was created. So now you can go and get it. So now you can react to it. Is that what you mean? And then the subscriber here gets that, and that's safely in the database. This event can't be published until the record's committed to the database. So now this is safe. So which is why that's an argument. For whatever reason, if you get to this command handle and that's not actually set, it'll throw. And then we publish. We pull the state out of the database. Krishna, hello. Can you explain in brief about your current project and what you're planning here? In brief, the project is a project planning and management tool. Ultimately, there'll be a ticketing system, etc. in there. There's the intention. It is aimed at providing the ability to plan products and capture requirements effectively, and be able to work on those pieces in a way that I feel that tools like Jira don't capture. So it's a large application, so it's hard to describe exactly. But ultimately, um, it comes down to developers need requirements when they're building software. I want to make sure that I'm doing my best to try and get them the requirements and make them ask the questions they need to ask. Um, yeah. If there's anything specific you want to know, please ask. I'm completely open to talking about the platform as much as I am about developing it. Yeah. I think so. Ted was trying events. The domain events were particularly confusing because we would typically do OOP and it doesn't fit with the whole command eventing very well, it seemed. In the domain with hexagonal, we typically track state by modifying fields on a class. So it is why, again, I've gone over it a few times, right? This is kind of aggregate behavior, but not aggregate. And I'm not quite sure how I fully feel about this. It's why I protect the fields. So you can't just change the object state. I wrap the ability to change it behind the methods, right? Because that gives me the ability to protect and trigger this. So I am allowing you to create an object. I'm just making sure I know that I can produce the event from it. And similarly on task, when we do the task, he says with confidence, I have the create, I have the update the status, so the update status and the update details. So again, the behavior's a little blended, but I feel it's acceptable. But these add the events to say, yep, this changed, by the way. Right. I haven't implemented that in here. Event sourcing is something that I feel require. I mean, event sourcing and domain-driven design fit very well together. Event sourcing uses a similar mechanism in the events because these events then become more state. And the confusing thing about event sourcing is when you have your object, you kind of initialize your object with a state and then play events, or you initialize the object by replaying the events back against the entity and firing the things off. So it's a very weird way of doing it because you might have methods that produce the state, produce the change, but the event is what changes the state of the data. Yeah. So I didn't see a need to do that in this project because I don't really care about the individual. So if there's thousands of events, you have to handle thousands of events on every change. You mean event storming or event sourcing? Sorry, event storming, event sourcing, or because for me, if there's I only handle the events. I only produce the events. So in event sourcing, you can have snapshots. So let's say you start at blank object, right? Really? God, that didn't show up on stream. I pressed a G instead of a Q, and Microsoft offered me some weird results. So let's say you have public class widget, and it has int quantity. And it has public decimal cost, right? I'm not going to try and build out an actual event sourcing thing, but what I'm going to show is you might have an event public class update. Hey Pushtoy, how you doing? It's fine. It's not real. Update widget quantity event, right? Public, and then actually that'd be a record or something. You don't, it's not an offset, it's not a change to that. It's just the quantity is now this, and you have a public record update widget cost event, right? Decimal cost. So you're setting those things. Well, if event one comes, so if the widget is, you know, one and the quantity is one, cost is 4, and you publish the update event, update widget quantity of 3, then the quantity is 3 and the cost is 4, right? And then you publish the update cost event and you say it's now 9.5, right? Then the quantity is 3 and the cost is 9.5, right? So loads of these things happen every time you make a change. You do these things, it updates the actual value, the state, it publishes the event, it stores the event off as here's what I was changing. When you reestablish the event, so let's now say we save, right? All those events are serialized to the database. When we want to load the state up of a widget, right, we have to essentially replay all the events in the history. So what you can do is you can say, okay, well, every day I might want to snapshot it, or every week I want to snapshot it. So you save that current snapshot out and you establish the widget from the snapshot and play every event past that time. So as you get more, if you've got a heavily evented component in your system, you don't start right back from the beginning, but you have the option of. So if you need to validate something, you can say, okay, replay the history of the object from point 0. Does it match what I currently have? No. Okay, remove all the other snapshots and snapshot now, because the history is the truth, not the snapshots. The snapshots are just a point in time reference. Push die, hello, by the way. That was the first time chat. My apologies that it was decimal. Would you have preferred me to put double there, by the way? So yeah, event sourcing is a very great concept, but it takes a lot to implement. And for Liquid Sky, I don't necessarily need that, right? Now, I could use it for change, like as in place of changes, because you naturally get a change history. You naturally get undo. But it's a lot of work to implement and it's a lot of challenges separate. So event sourcing is a very good concept. I'd love to be able to use it more, but for what I'm doing in Liquid Sky, I don't think it is necessarily. I think it's a little bit more technology than I want to do. No, I just always forget about decimal. So yeah, that's why. So in my system, when I change an entity, I have an event, a domain event that triggers in the background. That is stored on the object. The object actually has a list of domain events stored in it, right? And then when it's committed to the database, the interceptors, foundations, shared kernel, interceptors, domain event publishing, this goes through, finds all the domain events, then clears the events off, and then goes through and publishes those events to the system. And those are just notifications in Mediator, right? Now, those are stored to the database as well, but in a separate transaction to the one that stored the data. So they'll only get saved once the actual data has been persisted. So at the very worst, the system doesn't notify, but it captures the data as it was intended. And that's the goal, right? So I capture the task. If the event breaks or something happens, the worst that happens is an integration event doesn't fire until the rest of the system is changed. I could capture that as an alert and understand, oh, I need to go fix that. So yeah, it'll deal with transactions properly. So it's funny, I don't think of this as an event driven architecture. It doesn't dawn on me. Oh yeah, it's very event driven. Would you say these are more database systems, not meaning it is slight or anything? Yeah, I mean it is a database. Yeah. Yeah, there's not a lot of, again, if you look at the behavior of most of these systems, there's not a lot of domain behavior. Yeah, I understood what you meant there with the question. You're right. If you look at something like Jira, if you look at something like those sorts of tools, there's not an actual lot of domain because the domain comes when how people use the tool, not how the tool works. There might be some rules here and there that are, hey, by the way, when this event fires, I want to react to it in this way. Like if the sprint ends, I might want to do some certain things, but it's not really a deep, rich domain. It's more a reactive component. So the events-based system works really well for this because what I'm aiming for is a system that tells people what happens, right? That's the long-term goal of this project is it's not necessarily about just the planning, it's about the ability to tell people things are happening, things are not happening. So yeah, yeah, I agree. If the domain was heavier, I'm not sure I'd say, I mean, I'm not sure because obviously this is let's say clean architecture aligned, right? Maybe it's not full clean architecture as people might understand it, but um I still think this works in a domain because again, I've kind of got these semi contexts, right? These bounded contexts essentially, but they just don't have a lot of domain behavior to them. Um, but there's a lot of data, right? Um, what's driven me to do it this way is that idea that I want to react to things, but I also want nice, clean, single responsibility wherever possible, right? So the create sprint, it does exactly what it says on the tin, right? If you look at add task, it does exactly what it says on the tin. Update task is a little bit more complicated because it could update a couple of things, but it updates the task, right? Um, let's say we were brought on dirty architecture. Mojo, did I say hello, by the way? I hope I did. I apologize if I didn't. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, it's the architecture that works for you, right? If it fits within the way you consider how it should work and it's easy to change, easy to maintain, easy to understand, that's the architecture that works. Um, so this can solve the same problems doing it this way. It can, it's how you break down the problem. It's going to get you to the architecture. And is it useful for you? Is well, are you able to change it and understand it and move between it? Right. I'm clearly able to move fast in this architecture. Blackjack game has a lot of behavior. There's a dealer, multiple cards, calculations, etc. Yeah, there's a lot of rules and yeah, it's not necessarily a reactive system. You don't need events in that world. You need uh rules as to what happens next or whatever. Yeah. Don't change working code is what I often hear. Do you remember was it Monsters Inc? There's a closet or a scary there's like a scary thing. I kind of want to make that the meme that fits with that. Uh, it's not much about data. You have to store who won, lost a game, maybe a mid-game thing. That's it, really. Yeah, it's the system has rules in place, and you need to. Yeah, Yeah, I hadn't thought of your system as event driven either, but when I saw the stuff Ted was doing in your code, it's event driven. Yeah. I think the working part is enhancing there itself. Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. Okay. Concerning integration, when updating sprint. So we want to validate these things. So in our update sprint handler, we now need to make that work. So again, we're going to do var tenant ID equals await sender dot send new acquire tenant command. That's going to take the tenant identifier and var user ID equals yep. Then we're going to create our sprint, and then we're going to add our sprint, and then we're going to return unit.value. Ta-da! So we're going to take the data and we're going to store the data. So we're storing, again, here we're storing actual IDs because these actually do have references in the system, right? So we have actual objects to refer back to. We don't often need to go back to the tenant, but it's fine. And we go to our user. So the sprint can get back to the tenant and it can get back to the user who created it and all that. And we can expose that in the view. So that's why those need acquiring, because those, for those who haven't seen this before, the way this works is because everything's split up into multiple systems. Certain events might not have hit this component at the point that code hits. It's unlikely at this point, but you shouldn't dismiss it. So for data integrity, I need to create if not exists, basically. So acquire is go get me a tenant ID. I don't care how you get the tenant ID. I just need a tenant ID I know is valid to use here. And then we store it. So does our test pass now? I should hope not. Oh yeah, it was. Oh, that's why I was stuck on that, wasn't I? I shouldn't have moved forward. Why do you know like that? What does that error even mean? The UTC offset of the local date time parameter does not match the offset argument. It's not that. These offsets don't really matter right this second, so it's not like I'm going to cause a major problem with this. There you go. Okay. So we called the acquires, but we didn't pass them in because we actually didn't specify in here what the acquire should do. So we need sender dot send arg dot is. There you go. That's actually what that should be, I think. Tell me task is, yeah. So if you haven't seen it before, I have the concept of a task in the system. I'm not shying away from avoiding. I'm not shying away from. Um, what's that? Result. What are you not liking there? Should infer it. Okay. Okay, we're going to test this. Oh, okay. Derp, 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 derp. Are they identifier? Source user identifier. Just because there's a system concept called task doesn't mean that I'm going to not use the word task. Um, it's better to represent what actually happens in the system and use the right terminology. And yes, it might get a little difficult at times. Yes, sometimes I may suffer from the, oh, I forgot to reference this thing and I'm actually referring to task from the system, but I'll deal with it. And if we decide there's a different term than task, then we'll rename it, right? Again, to the point, you shouldn't be scared of your code. You shouldn't be scared to change your code. Okay, we can remove them now. They're not necessary. Okay, so let's see what happens now. Ta-da, that works. Okay. So now in our receivers, I don't do these enough, and I should do when sprint integration event received. What I'm validating here is I'm going to call. I'm passing the right data to the actual handler. Update sprint handler is invoked. So we have private iSender, sender equals null, and then arrange act. Our subject is the private sprint receiver. That sounds like a funny name, but it's fine. Sprint receiver. And this is just an event receiver of sprint integration event. Right. Again, if you're new to the stream, if you have any thoughts, questions, opinions, you're more than welcome to ask or share. The system is a little difficult to just jump around in at this point. It is quite a large. It's not complicated. It is just large at this point. So there's a lot of code. There's a lot of components. There's a lot of moving parts, and it can look intimidating, but it isn't. So if you are interested, if you want to know more, you just have to ask. If you're not sure what you want to ask on stream, there is a Discord that you can join, and I'm happy to talk about this stuff off stream as well and share what I can. I mean, it's not an open source project though. Yeah, it's a little bit too unwieldy to be an open source project. Breaking a few rules of TDD here by creating something dependencies, etc., a little bit ahead of time, but I do know what I need here. So what we're verifying here is sender received. Send arg is update sprint. Yep. And yep. 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 Come on. Then arg.any cancellation token. Ooh. That was a misstep, wasn't it? What time? Look around. Take care, Delta. Have a great day. See you again later. no doubt. And command, yeah, that's not right. Source user identifier. Update sprint has who did the thing, right? It doesn't really care about created by or whatever, so that concept doesn't hurt. Now we're taking the source user identifier as the user who created it, because that's what they're responsible for. If this, sorry, my monitor just went off. If the system had to produce events, I might adjust there a little bit, because obviously then the system will be producing things and that gets more complicated, but I don't see any way the system's going to do that at this point. Okay, so our subject here is that, and subject dot handle dot receive async new sprint integration event source testing expected source user identifier cancellation token dot none. So the sprint integration event contains all this information, right? So the tenant identifier, name, start date, end date. See how that goes. Yep, that was correctly. Now we go here. So one thing I've reflected back on this last week is there's a few times where I've said, okay, we'll get this done today, or we'll get this done now. And I've been saying for a long time, like, you shouldn't, time estimates are bad. But I keep doing it. Now I'm not, it's easy to throw out because I'm not under a deadline, right? Yes, it'd be nice to get done. Yes, it'd be nice to stop waffling and be able to see this work and get to that point. But it's really easy to throw out time estimates. And I've got to stop doing it. I've got to start thinking about the reason why I'm building the software is to plan and get an idea of what I want to do and set some real expectations as to when those things are done. So as we go into the next phase, which is once we've got the sprints working and we can assign the tickets to we can assign the tasks to the sprints, we can see the swim lanes and all those sort of fun things. We start talking about, okay, what are we going to do as far as estimation? I have started reading Mike Cohen's book on agile planning and estimation. One of the things it made clear, and I actually changed some of this stuff today, is I need to avoid the word agile. I'm trying to support a workflow. My implementation doesn't fit with their description of what agile is, right? Because I am separating out the expectation from the implementation. Ninja Agile. So I'm going to try and avoid, I'm not going to avoid it, but I'm going to try and avoid using the word agile planning and just make it about the planning and and whatnot. So yeah. So this is going to do await sender.send new update sprint dot command. Tenant identifier name, start date, end date, date update, last update, source user identifier. That works. That looks thin. That looks very thin. Side note, don't think of an elephant and nothing to do with what I thought it would. Okay. You're not eating the elephant? So, okay. We have our receiver. So I'm going to leave that in place now. My unit testing is not extensive. I am trying to do it more. As the application gets bigger, just saying I'll do that later is not good. So I am trying to be more mindful of doing that. That's what I thought it was related to, but it was related more to what happens at the beginning of next month every 4 years. Uh, okay. Okay. Um, okay. So we have Kafka. So this is configuring the consumer side of Kafka in these apps, and this is why they're referred to as receivers. So there's the dispatching consumer basically is it will subscribe to the threads, the topics, and it will use basically mediator. It's not quite mediator, but eventually it's essentially the same, and it will dispatch the messages. And that's why these are called receivers and not consumers, because they're not, the consumer consumes the message and then dispatches the message, and you receive the event as you asked for. Ultimately, the goal will be that these will be configurable at this setting, and we can deploy multiple copies of this same program and turn on or off different receivers based upon configuration. So you can scale out and because this will get very slow and very heavy. You might want to say, okay, well, tasks and sprints, we're not seeing a lot of them, so we could put them in one consumer, and then we could deploy 5 different versions of the project receiver or the planning item receiver, because that'll get through higher throughput. So ultimately, the goal will be to kind of flex that and test that. I did have a version of that working for a previous project. I just don't think it works for this yet. But yeah, that's the way it's meant to work. So this will ultimately end up being more configurable. So for right now, services that add transient, sprint receiver. So you register it with dependency injection, and then you go over here, you configure to add event receiver, sprint receiver. There we go. That's that hooked up now. Return vector. Thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it. Hope you're well. This doesn't do anything particularly clever. It just adds a call in to say, okay, register this method, and when you pass this data, invoke the method, and it will call receive. It also handles delete. You can actually deal with deletes here as well. Deletes are a null message. And there we go. That's all we need to do there. Because the Kafka configuration is handled at the console level, we do need to go here and say localhost 8500. So if we go to our Kafka configuration, these are our topics. This is a global list. Every system can start up and find all the things and know all the events, and then the topic it corresponds to. You can override that as well, but yeah. So type name is events.integration.sprint integration event. Comment events, that's the actual fully qualified assembly name. And the name is liquid sky dot sprints. Right. Copy that, save that, go down here, configurations, Kafka. Ocelot configuration is going to go away soon once we confirm that YARP is doing everything we need it to do. Need to do some more engineering on YARP to do the whole lookup console and solve clusters that way. I couldn't find anything that does that, so that's going to be challenging. And there we go. So now we should be able to publish an event and consume the event and store it in the database. Let's find out. History says this is not going to work. Because working first time would be way too easy. Right? Nope. Nope. Oh, I like these in-ears. These are a pair of Bose IE200s, but the metal in the ear loop snapped very early on, and this left one just keeps pinging out from behind my ear. So my ear's not high enough to keep it behind my ear, and it drives me crazy because I'll be sat there and it'll just pop out and turn sideways on me. So I need to find a better pair of headphones for me that aren't full over the ears, and yeah. I probably should just set up Bluetooth and have Bluetooth headphones. Get some elf ears. Yeah, that's the problem. It's my ears. They're funny shaped. Okay, so now we go to the liquid sky. We go here. Let's see. We need to create that. We need to create that topic, right? Liquid sky dot sprints. It's good practice to create your topics beforehand. The system will create some things. It's amazing though that the view receiver didn't crash because it should have subscribed to that topic when it started, and the topic didn't exist, therefore it should have failed. So I don't hold much hope for this actually consuming the first time, but we'll see. Actually on that topic, see what I did there? That's funny. Um, in the configuration here of Kafka, we have this, and I haven't been updating this. This is necessary to basically create all the topics when it starts up. So I need to go through and review this. No, I don't want to do that. But yeah, that needs to do that. That's another one where we'll probably want to move that to a core component. Anyway, Mojo. I'm the Geek. Good afternoon. How's it going? Okay, you're about to see the first major failure of the day. Okay. Make things work. Oh nine, no. We'll do them in October, in August or September, sorry. 0900 a.m. Started tomorrow at 9 a.m. and we'll finish it on the 24th. So we'll do a 6-day sprint at 9 a.m. Gonna make this drive to work later on. Let's home. I'm still employed. Let's hope I'm still employed at the end of the day. You'll be fine. Don't worry. Take care, Marjo. Drive safe. Trying to figure out why one file works going through our process and the other doesn't. I can't see anything different. Oof. Okay. So first thing we do is create the sprint. So if we go over here, we have a sprint created. We should see sprint created here as a domain event. We should see a sprint integration event published. So over here, we should see in our sprints, we should now have a message, and we publish the message. Ugh. That needs to be nullable, not empty. That's a problem. There's our topics, and now in our view, it almost got there as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to restart that integration. So internal, consumers, receivers. We're going to restart the view side of things. I don't think it registered properly. Because I didn't see, okay, LG monitor, not fun. Because there was no subscriber here, which is a telling thing. It's a telling thing, telling. No lag, but it doesn't look like it's listening to sprints. Why isn't it listening to the sprints? No authorizer is configured on the broker. Why aren't you registering the select? It went to do it because it got the tenant and the user. It did something. It just didn't do the insert. Oh, you know why? Because I'm an idiot. So you can do all this stuff, right? You can set up repositories, you can set up objects, you can say, okay, I've got a repository of this. But I bet you I didn't go in here and add sprints. So the context doesn't actually know about sprints. And there's my problem. It is a problem of having, so you could argue the code's complicated. There's, there's a lot to handle. There's a lot of mess. But it's the nature of the beast. If I want to use the tools, I could make it simpler. I could have made one API and have everything in one application, and it would have meant that I'd have had to go and add that first, etc. And I'd just have to keep repeating this effort. But I get a lot from having it this way. So it's it is what it is. Hey, good morning, One Lion. I don't think I've seen you yet today, so thank you very much for the shout out for Thindle. Appreciate it. I assume you are busy. I hope you are well. So this view integration should now reintegrate sprints. The offset might have moved forward because it consumed the message. Mr. Anhorn, by the way, thank you very much. I assume you are also busy, or I missed your message. I apologize. 61 months. My goodness me. Into the next 5 years. That's a scary concept. Okay, so prepare and rebalance. This doesn't update live. Sprints. Yeah, so it processed that message. But it didn't insert it because it failed on the insert, right? So let's go fix some things before I do that. So That integration event is slightly wrong because the integration event itself should have a nullable updated by. That's wrong. It shouldn't have that. That shouldn't break anything. Yep, super easy. Ordering 7 reports we export. Adding 3 columns leads to so much testing. Ugh. I will say the considering my dislike of the trying to figure out if I've broken anything step after making changes, you'd think I'd be more in integration testing. So yeah. Good morning. I got a pretty big headache and I'm trying to push through it to move on the direction I started going at the end of the stream yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Oh. May the headache disappear quickly and your productivity accelerate. So we got the integration event, we got that, it's now in the data context. We've got one more piece to do after this before we can see it, but I wish this was easy to integration test. I would so do it for your reports. Hour. I think it'd take 5 minutes to gen. Ugh. Yeah, one of the because I mean maybe because I'm so bad at it, because one of the things I want to do at my place is I want to start encouraging developers and QAs to, when they're doing stories, to create like a testable checklist. What are the steps necessary, and kind of document those out. Here's how we validate this is actually doing what it should do, and that we're this it validates. And this is the steps a developer should go through beforehand, as like the bare minimum of validation before handoff, and kind of make that definition of done. But we don't have steps, but each front end story does require automation before it's done. Yeah, automation's nice. One of the things I can, we how do I word this? QA is often out of step. If your development team develops in a certain way, your QA can't really start anything until after the work's done. So what happens is you might have a 2-week sprint, but your QA doesn't start until the back half, or you have to limit the amount of work you can do in that 2-week sprint. I've always thought it'd be okay for QA to have offset sprints. So their sprint starts in the second week of a developer sprint and goes at a step differently. And the stories that they need to do are in their sprint. And yeah, they can start them in the second week, but it's highly unlikely to need to start anything the first week anyway. But then they can finish things up properly and run at their own pace. Because then automation stuff can be handled, it can be discussed, it can be planned effectively and refined. And realistically, it's only the first week of any cycle that's a prep week for, yeah. Bug has been found. What was it, Rambling Geek? Anything good? And apologies, ads. I need to do that. Job watching on YouTube. I've got to figure out my spiel for YouTube, because I've been trying to consider, am I actually wanting to grow the channel? Do I want more people? Am I comfortable with what we have as a community? And I just want to make sure that people know that, if you like and interact with the videos on YouTube, it does more for the video than like, comment, subscribe. Short and simple. Yeah, it just feels so. I'm still not comfortable with it. never been comfortable with the self-promotion stuff. It, even on my own stream, I'm not comfortable with promoting my own stream. What do I need to do now? I've got that hooked up. I've got that hooked up. We're publishing that. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, because I didn't change the updated by, so that's why. That's why it was 000s before. We take a full file of zips, it unpacks and processes them. This customer can't handle more than 25 files per zip. That was the difference between the files, less files in the one working versus the one. What? Can't handle more than 25. What sort of limit is 25? Is it their code for processing it, or is it your code for processing that? We take a file, unpack and process them. Okay. Okay. So it's just an arbitrary amount stuffed in there to full stack. This is the hardest part about this project now. I'm gonna have to start creating profiles for different components. Like, oh, I'm working on tasks, therefore I'll start up tasks, the right consumers and stuff. I'm gonna have to create all sorts of different profiles for whichever perspective you're working on. Because waiting to start 14 projects every time is getting. I mean, it's not like you have to wait hours for it, but it's getting kind of tedious. Ba-dum. Of VS Code profiles and multiple solutions. It was until I found that I missed a project in the solution and get no into it. Yeah. I mean, I've seen 100+ project solutions. I have seen bigger solutions, but none that I would say I liked the idea of working in, and none that were actually organized around a core application. Normally, it's because every single project ever added to the platform was dumped into one solution file, and everything was there. All the libraries, all the stuff, everything associated, the tools, everything. Don't click into the definition. I'm seeing compile code because it's not. Yeah, nice. So yeah, Liquid Sky is definitely at the point where footprint wise, it's bigger than most other .NET projects I've seen or worked with. Code wise, there's a lot of code, but there's not a lot of code. Okay, so let's go sprints round 2. So we got sprint here. Let's delete this one. Let's not end up with a mess. I like having multiple solutions. It helps for figuring out what needs to be deployed together to get working. Yeah, I think potentially creating the different solutions for the individual components, because again, don't forget, like the entire I didn't mean that to you, I meant that in general. The entire purpose of this is you could work on the individual components, you can work on planning, you can work on the view, you can work on all those pieces independently of the rest. So multiple solutions is possible. But being that I'm the only developer, it's useless to me right this second because I pretty much always need the ability to run the full stack, right? Even if I like the view part is easy, right? If I just want read-only mode. Okay, so let's create a sprint. Next set of work. And again, we'll do that on the 18th, 09 a.m. We'll finish that on the 26th. We'll do 8 days this time, 09 a.m. We create a sprint. I don't think that way. My game platform is physically split by repo, and that helps to make sure I don't cross boundaries. That's healthier. Sprint created was the source. Consumer groups, view integration. 2. Oh, that means it failed. Cannot insert the value null into column ID. Okay, so what we're going to do there is we're not going to stop the entire stack. We're going to stop the receiver. So on the topic of multiple repos, yeah, never mind. I know you're busy with your stuff. I'm not going to try and get you engaged in that one. Edit. That's why. Fun fact, I don't think you can do that. What I just did. No, you can't. Drop that table. What we do is we go over here. Tasks, sprints. Oh, identity. Oh, view side of things. I missed the identity part. Int identity. That's the problem. Oh, no. There we go. So now, because we've stopped the receivers, right, so we should have our table back. So what I'd missed is I'd missed the fact that it was an auto-incrementing ID. So the ID in here is its own ID for this record, right? It's whatever this system deems. The identifier is what matters to chain to gather it all up together. That's the shared info. So now what we do is we go back over here, go to our here, update this to 1. I don't want to consume that first sprint because I already deleted it, right? Now we update that, we get that. So now it thinks it's done 1, but it's got a second one to go. So now we start the receivers again, and we should consume that event, and it'll work. Think of a good place to hang out. Nice one, Line. Thank you very much for that. Hey, we should have a sprint. And there's our sprint. Created by user ID 2 in tenant 1. They added, yep, 8:30. So UTC, remember, this is +4. Really? Yes, yeah, it's +4, right? Yeah. UTC -4 right now, yeah. Crystal Coda, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome in. There we go. So now we have a sprint in, hello. We have a sprint in our view. We have a sprint in our tasks. So what's next? Well, let's use a tool, right? I've got a tool for doing this. Come on. Wakey, wakey. Okay, so we create the dialog, right? We update the service. We do that. That's done. We create the endpoint for add sprint, new endpoint, add sprint, validate, publish integration event. Yep, that's done. Consume the sprint to the view. So we need a new receiver, a new update sprint handler. We store the sprint, and no, we now need to do these parts. So this is in progress, right? So if we go back to the planning item for this component, we can go, and I could have navigated from the actual thing, but never mind. Allow developers to build a sprint. So we said that we should be able to view the boards on a task screen, add a sprint dialog, and then we should be able to assign tasks from a backlog. So that's what's coming next. Those are the two tasks we just did for the dialog, and that's the first one in progress to be able to see the sprint. And once we can see the sprint in the view, we can then proceed to the two tasks, which is getting the drop down working. Again, rough UI, trying to build out what I can and make it usable. But UI UX is not my talent. So let's stop that running. Let's get that committed. Bit more than I would like there, but that's fine. Yeah. Include sprint integration event. And add extension for treating date as UTC. Include sprints topic into Kafka configuration file for sprint integration event. If you're new to the stream, if you have any thoughts, questions, opinions of what I'm doing, please feel free. I'm happy to talk about what I'm doing just as much as I am. For it of topics to include tasks and sprints. I work on this Monday to Friday for about 2 hours a day. And I've been building this platform for a year. So there's a lot in it. There's a lot of things to talk about. There's a lot of things it does, a lot of things it doesn't do. So, yeah, publish, receive, sprint, integration event, create publisher on application side, sprint created, create receiver, update handler, and on view side, consume, create script for sprints table in view. So if you haven't seen it before, if you're new to the stream, this is the project I'm working on overall. What I'm working on right now is the client. We're just experiences. The client sends created the sprint. It went into the task component that created sprint and published an integration event. And what I was just committing there was the piece that consumed this integration event, or published the integration event, and then consumed it and stored that data into the view. So now we need the view. That's a really cool flowchart. Is there an application that creates it? So this is, I use Obsidian. Yeah, Obsidian, is this what I'm thinking? Yes. Which is the tool for doing all this. And then I've got a Excalidraw plugin in there, which allows me to do the chart, the diagrams. So all the documentation that I'm building for this platform is stored in here. I'm not very good at documentation, so this is, I like pictures. So, um, yeah, that's true. A component has integration events, service bus and events. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, yeah, lots of pictures. But overall, this is the pretty much the diagram of the system as it stands right this second. So let's go create that view. The view in the view. So right now we don't have the concept of tasks associated with sprints. That's coming next. So let's create. So let's start from sprints, right? Join. Actually, this is actually a pretty clean one. Is that the right? No, that's not the right Andreas. That's the right one. Thank you. Okay. So planning creating a Python script to automatically create my own flowcharts for a project. Just something to help me visualize code for large projects. Yeah. I mean, I'm using .NET and Rider. Rider does give me some pretty good tools for layout. He says, as he can't remember where he's going right this second. Structure. No, not structure. Hierarchy. I thought that was a tool. Type hierarchy. Uh, hierarchy. Control Alt K. Awesome. There was, call that confidence. Yeah, diagrams. Here we go. So I can do, this is going to look crazy, by the way. We'll go with it. Got a feeling a new dev machine is going to be required. Um, So there are tools for doing that. It depends on what you need um, from the project. Like to me, I don't often find myself needing to go look for code or look through and understand. Like a lot of the code in here is following a very similar pattern, so there's not really much of a need for anything else. Oh, that's why I do need the view, by the way. So we need start date time as UTC. Is it offset UTC as date? Why don't I just go and look? So when we query out of the database, it's going to treat these date times, no matter what I do, as being uh, local time. So if I don't tell it, by the way, it's an offset and it's zeroed offset, it won't assume UTC, so it becomes messy. Now that could be something I need to learn how to handle better. But for right now, it's working for me, so I'm not messing around with it. At time zone, there you go. So that's that, right? Start, date, time. This is going to be a lot. So name, so identifier, name, start date, time. We don't need a tenant. We're only ever in the tenant, so that's always implied. Although the tenant identifier does need to come through. So yes, we are going to need a tenant. Tenants T on S dot tenant ID equals T dot ID. Because you know how often I've done that, there's probably a likelihood I should change that structure and not actually go and associate with a tenant via ID. Because I would rarely need to go and get um, the tenant from a record. Start they added at time zone UTC as date added. Last updated at time zone UTC as last updated. Those are confusing now, so that means s.identifier and s.name. Right. And created by user ID and updated by user ID. So that's our view as such, right? So new view, sprints view, that gives us that. Then we need to script that out. Go here, go to a view views, text file 013, sprints view.sql. That creates our view there. Now, in our domain, we have a view version. Now, this is called the same. I don't bother about tacking on the word view because from the GraphQL side of things, it's a sprint, it's a task, it's etc. So I don't need to call it anything different. And because when you're asking for this data, you're in the context of the thing. So you're either in view or in entities, you're not in both. So technically view could be broken out. But the sprint here is not going to look like the sprint there, right? Because we're going to need that. Why would you think they're strings? Oh, because it's nvarchar. Give it a GUID. Name. These are not date times. They're offsets. That's nullable. The rest is not. Created by user ID, updated by user ID. Now these are virtual references. We don't need tenant. We need user, created by user, updated by user. Okay. Yeah, that gives us our view object. Let's not forget the repository this time. So the view context is the one that gets this one. RS. Yes, I just did the alphabet thing in my head. Now we've got sprints in there. Didn't forget it this time. And again, if you do have questions, if you have thoughts on what I'm doing, if you have opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to share. I reserve the right to ignore suggestions, but I am interested in hearing people's opinions on software, even if it's your software is terrible. Just be prepared to tell me why my software is terrible. So this is an identity type configuration of Sprint, and it's the view version of the Sprint I'm dealing with there, not the other version, right? And then this is just, there we go. And that's the same pattern. Right? I don't have to specify anything else. Let's just double check that I didn't just include the wrong sprint in here. It knew that I was talking about the sprints there. Okay, so that's the view, the view configured. That's the actual database side of things configured. Now let's go to the GraphQL side. So we do need some infrastructure because we need to specify that we can't see certain information. So we have the option to include the created by user and updated by user information. We don't want the IDs. The IDs are useless to the UI, and we don't want to even encourage tracking that. So we create a definition for the sprint. And essentially, it's going to do this. They're not all based off the same object, so there's not much value in creating that at this point, even though I'm going to end up doing this quite a lot. Right? So that's the view sprint. That's that sprint type. There we go. So that just tells it when you're doing GraphQL, those fields are ignored. So now I'm going to continue this pattern. I think there's a way of organizing this. I need to review. Now I've got used to using hot chocolate. I think there's a way of doing this better. There's a reason I'm copying and pasting. Okay. Authorize, import that. This is going to be sprint. ViewDB context is fine. And that's sprints. That tenant. And that's get sprints. Okay. And there we go. So the reason I'm using the DB context straight up in here, by the way, is if I create a set of objects and queries, etc., set away from my away from the GraphQL, so I pull the database away from the GraphQL component. When I make a query to say get 50 fields, or I have a query that has a potential 50 fields it can return, and I say I just want 3 fields, I will always incur the cost of pulling all 50 fields out and sending that back and then trimming it out at this area, at the GraphQL layer. And it'll work, it's fine, it can do that. If I enable projection and filtering and sorting, instead of projection and filtering primarily, it gives me the ability to actually dynamically build the query and only query the data I need from the database. So if I ask for 3 fields, even though the object exposed is 50, I get the benefit of just having the query do that. It'll do select those 3 fields from the table. If I, for projection, if I have one of those virtual properties like created by user, I can say, oh, and get me the user name, etc., etc., etc. And that gives me the ability to then get more information off of the user. Those users, by the way, are protected here. So even though I return the user as a nested object of this, essentially, right, it does know that that user can't have the ID. So I can't, even if I join the object, I don't get ID. So I get the benefit of having it build the queries based upon the GraphQL request, which gives me a lot of control. So their views, I can't update them. I'm not exposing the right version of the data. It's just the read data. And yes, I know you can update through view. That's possible, but it's a lot more difficulty. So I'm not using GraphQL for mutation. I'm only using GraphQL for query. And I kind of like the way it's working so far. It does fit very well. And I can optimize the schema for the GraphQL piece, which is why this is separated out the way it is because the client has individual actions and those do things on these individual APIs. The events that publish from the system could go anywhere. I could do anything with this data, but the view consolidates all this back together and exposes a queryable version that I don't have to then know about all those different APIs. So there's only one API that the client knows about, and it just goes to GraphQL or to the APIs. Napalm, good morning. How are you doing? Okay, so with that said, I should be able to run this. We should be able to go here, get an access token, open banana cake pop, which might be one of the single most amusing. Hey Granger devs, how you doing? Morning. GraphQL is pretty flexible to work with. I use that at work as part of our API layer. Yeah, I'm enjoying using it in this way. I don't know whether I'm using it the right way, but I think I've got enough now to understand, how to learn a bit more. And it's working very well for this case. Back into the drudgery of AAD setup today. Excuse me, drudgery of Entra ID. So the project consists of a lot of different pieces. So I'm hearing right now in my ear rather than my nose, a bunch of pings because it's starting all 14 projects that need to run to get the full app up, which I technically didn't need because I just needed GraphQL. Let's create a new document, get sprints. Let's refresh the schema. There we go. Sprints. This should be name, start date time, end date time, created by you. Oh, why are you offering created by user ID? You shouldn't be doing that. Oh, I didn't add it. That's why. And this should be name and email, say. There we go. So again, everything comes down to Zulu, so everything's referenced off of that. That's interesting though. I probably don't want that. There's an interesting date time challenge we're going to get up to. Ads are going to start in a few minutes. Just for reference, in 3 minutes they'll start. Do apologize, but it keeps the pre-rolls off. We're going to come back on this tomorrow because I've introduced a problem. I've got an unexpected side effect of date time. So that's wrong. Let's stop GraphQL a second and just validate that I can fix that problem. So the problem there is I have created this type, but I did not set this type. So we need to do type of sprint type. Need to register that that type's there. Now I should be able to start GraphQL. So in the GraphQL here, I do have hooked up subscriptions as well. So the client has an open web, an authenticated WebSocket connection as well. So I can actually push messages down to the client. So I do have some code, not yet really widely used, but I do have the ability to push notifications down to the client through GraphQL rather than using it for, rather than like setting up Signal separately. So the subscriptions are stored in Redis. And I do have a layer there to do that, which works quite nicely. Let's just validate that schema change. And now I shouldn't have, yeah, now I don't have created by use ready. There we go. And they added last updated. Yeah. See, that's correct. But I set it as 9 a.m. So I think start date time. Now, when that goes down to the client, that will show the sprint starting at 5 a.m., which is wrong. It starts at 9 a.m. The user said it starts at 9 a.m. So in that instance, I don't want to convert to UTC necessarily. But at some point along the line, I will do. So we're going to have to re-engineer some of that piece. We're going to have to rethink that piece to get that accurate. That was unintended. Come on, computer. There you go. You can do things. So stream is still up. Sorry. Oh dear. I apologize. We'll get the bobblehead. I was trying to see if there's another dev stream that's up and running right this second. That we can go to, but it might just be full bots. That's not a bad thing to go to full bots. Full bots is awesome. And his game's really cool, and I want to be able to play that. Layla. Yeah, we can go raid Layla if you want. Yeah, we'll go raid into Layla. Layla's on the same size numbers. Megatron's got loads. Well, Fullbots has built a game, block shop. He's got the demo up for Steam Next Fest, and um, it's just a really cool little puzzle game that I highly recommend checking out. Granger Devs, thank you very much for the follow. Um, so for anyone new to the stream, this application is about a year old now. I've been working on it on my spare time, well, mainly in my stream time, which is about 2 hours every day, Monday to Friday. The idea is it is a project management and planning application. I'm going to remove the word agile from this right this second. But the goal being to split up the planning and requirements gathering aspects of software development from the actual doing aspects of software development. It's a distributed system. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of Kafka and mass transit, RabbitMQ. We use GraphQL, as you just saw. This is an Angular application, and yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts. So I'm always open to questions. It is not open source. The intention is to make this an actual product in the long term. But I'm taking my time. I'm building it the way I want to build software, and that's what I'm sharing on stream. That being said, if you do have questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, I'm always open to learning and growing and adapting my way of doing things. I'm not ashamed to do that. Thanks, Napalm. And yeah, it's just I love writing software. I love sharing the journey and having other developers involved. So if you have opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to share. There's Discord links in the cards below if you are interested in asking further questions off stream. I'm always open to that and sharing other projects. So yeah, feel free. Okay, we're gonna go raid Layla. Layla's building a game. Layla is an application developer who has kind of pivoted a little bit to game dev the last 6 months or so, I think. And she's going through all the trials and tribulations of building game software with her partner. So let's go raid Layla. Don't forget, tomorrow community day on 119 stream, and 119 has been a fantastic mod and has really started helping me out with the shout outs because I'm really bad at shout outs. I need to remember to do more, but 119's been doing that. And my long-term goal, or near short-term goal, is to build an actual bot to do the shout outs and actually build a site around a concept I have. So that will be, I've got to just figure out a good breaking point for this where I'm not making so much progress on Liquid Sky that it feels really difficult to just step away from it. And we could probably use Liquid Sky to plan developers.stream, but that will be an open source project and that'll be shared with the community. So anyway, let's go raid Layla. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for hanging out, for all the support. I appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Eastern. My accent doesn't give it away, but I am actually East Coast US. So that's slightly confusing. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. Deflux, thank you very much for being here for the entire stream. It's been awesome. Thank you. So take care all. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.